Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here with us. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to those watching on Facebook and on our other social media channels. And thank you to those who are watching the recording, wherever you are. We appreciate you being here. My name is Leigh Owens. I am the founding executive director of the PENNfranchise Project and the education and advocacy director for the Pennsylvania Prison Society. I'm happy to be here with you all, Allegheny County, Pittsburgh, all throughout Pennsylvania, and anyone who may be joining from outside of Pennsylvania. Thank you for being here for this pre-election day webinar as we discuss some of the most pressing issues facing the carceral community as it relates to democratic electoral engagement. As you all may know, as a formerly incarcerated person, anyone in Pennsylvania who is serving time for a misdemeanor offense or a serving pretrial time, you are able to vote. You can request a mail-in ballot. If you feel like if you think you'll be home on election day, you can pre-register and you can walk into a polling location. If you have served time for a felony conviction in your home, you are eligible to vote. And so, we want the carceral community, we want the formerly incarcerated people and currently incarcerated folks that we serve every day to know that they are able to cast their vote. Because as many of you know, many of the important issues surrounding, mass incarceration, whether it be education, whether it be dealing with poverty or drug addiction, many of those issues, formerly and currently incarcerated people, we deal with those issues the most, right? So it's very important that our constituents know that not only are they eligible to vote, but that they should, and and it's important that they understand why. This election, we have several judicial races happening throughout Pennsylvania. We have district attorney races. There are Supreme Court justices up for re-election, and so this is an extremely important election for everyone, but specifically for currently and formerly incarcerated people. The last thing I'll say before we begin this panel is that we found in 2020 that out of roughly 25 to 30,000 people that were incarcerated at the county level, only 52 people requested a mail-in ballot. 52 people out of Pennsylvania's between 62 and 64 county jails requested a mail-in ballot. So we started PENNfranchise in order to help address that. And since then, we've seen tremendous strides in the amount of voter and electoral engagement that's happening in correctional facilities throughout Pennsylvania. Not that that work wasn't already happening, but we've certainly seen an increase. We've seen a few wins here, particularly as it relates to specific county level measures where the counties are really beginning to step up and take voter education and electoral engagement for incarcerated people more seriously. And so with that, I want to kind of start going into the purpose of this webinar. Tomorrow is election day, as you all know. And not only will we have the opportunity to vote on, elected officials, politicians, but there are several ballot measures happening in Pittsburgh. There's a ballot measure happening in Philadelphia for a prison community oversight board. And again, there are several judicial races that we're watching as well. And so, we want to talk a little bit about the carceral community and the issues that our population deals with and how those issues, although the entire, Commonwealth is affected by these issues, why the carceral community oftentimes is being affected by these inadequacies more than anyone. And these things that we're going to be talking about often lead to mass incarceration, right? And so we want our constituents to understand that not only is it about building, electing candidates, but it's about building power in our various communities so that the elected officials can look at our community and say, these folks are actually voting. And not only are they voting, they're watching what we're doing in city council, they're watching what we're doing in the state house. They're engaged, they're showing up to events, and they're holding us accountable. And when that begins to happen, the more that begins to happen, the more the issues that matter to us they'll be able to take a little bit more seriously. We'll start to see more movement on some of those issues. So I have a extremely illustrious panel that I'm very, very excited to be talking to today. And I want to open it up to the panel, but I also want to pass it over to Dr. Cai Morris, who is the executive director of Leigh PA Institute, and who is one of the organizers of this webinar, to give brief remarks, and we'll go into our panel discussion. Dr. Cai.
Thank you so much for having me here. Oh, am I unmuted now? Okay, thank you for inviting me to participate this evening. I appreciate everyone taking the time or making the time on the Monday before Election Day. I know that we are all busy. Some of us are supporting candidates. Some of us are candidates, whatever your role is. Oh, it says they're static. Yeah? Is it better? I hope that it has improved. Okay. And I apologize that I'm now sitting in the dark, but I think that the static you were hearing, it was related to the fan that was powering the light. That is, you know, I'm not the most tech savvy, but we'll just keep going because this is an important conversation. I am one of two executive directors at Leigh PA Institute. We are a 501c3 organization. What we do is civic education all across the Commonwealth. And so my role in this conversation is as we expand this project, it will be more than webinars. We will be actually preparing some advocates to go inside the county prisons to really just do some general education and prepare those who are currently incarcerated to understand what a ballot measure actually is, right? Because if you've not ever participated in the electoral process before and you see these strange yes or no questions on your ballot, what do you do? How do you know which way to vote, which way is in your interest, which way is not against your, which way is not in your interest? So my role in this conversation is the ongoing education. I do appreciate Leigh Owens for inviting me to be able to participate, and shout out to Leigh because he was one of the first graduates of our professional development program that we have titled Ready to ED. And it is a pleasure to revisit our interactions and our education together. And I'm excited for what the PENNfranchise project and the Prison Society has in store for you. Thank you to the esteemed women who are making up this panel this evening. And I wish you all the best and all the success. Good luck this evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cai. Thank you for your always supporting us and this work that we do. And so we're gonna move right over to our panel. And again, I have the distinct honor of having a conversation with several, community activists, advocates, lobbyists, folks that I have a tremendous amount of respect for, to talk about these issues. We have with us Miracle Jones from One Hood, Brittany Smalls, Black Voters Matter, and Tanisha Long, Abolitionist Law Center. Unfortunately, Selena King, chair of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus, was not able to jump on at this time. I'm hoping that she'll be able to jump on later on in the conversation. But for now, we have a great panel, a great number of guests. So I want to just move right into introductions, starting with Miracle, and just have each and every one of our panelists give a brief introduction of themselves, their role in the organization, their role in this work. And I think that's it.
Yes, thank you so much, Leigh, for this invitation. I'm very much honored. My name is Miracle Jones. I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs here at One Hood Power. Some of the work that I do is to engage the community, to educate and empower people around elections. But more importantly, I am a daughter of someone who was incarcerated. So I know firsthand the experiences and the struggles that people have once they become entangled and ensnared within the criminal justice system. So I really am thankful today to be a part of this panel.
Thank you, Miracle. Tanisha?
Hi, my name is Tanisha Long. I am with both the Abolitionist Law Center, which is a 501c3, and our political arm, Straight Ahead, which is a 501c4. We work to improve conditions for currently and formerly incarcerated people and people who have been impacted by the criminal legal system, whether it be in the courts, whether it be in the jails, whether it be through the police, or whether it be through legislation and policies that make it harder for them to live their lives and be members of society and be treated fairly in the way they deserve. I'm a person who deeply cares about issues of incarceration. I've been incarcerated at times myself before. I have family members that are currently and formerly incarcerated, and a person who's incarcerated right now. So these are things that I care very deeply about, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Thank you so much, Tanisha. Brittany?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brittany Smalls, and I am the Western PA Lead Regional Organizer with Black Voters Matter Fund. We're a national organization based out of Atlanta, Georgia. As I said, I'm in the western part of Pennsylvania, and I cover Cambria, Allegheny, Beaver, and Erie counties. And we work to build power in marginalized, predominantly Black communities. And we do that by partnering with grassroots organizations in these communities and supporting them with resources and trainings to build power. We know that elections are a tool, but not the tool to the liberation of our people. And our people include our formerly incarcerated. And we work recently, we have partnered with other with some of our partner organizations to go into the Allegheny County Prison and support with voter registration and completed helping the incarcerated with our incarcerated citizens with completing their mail-in ballots. And again, I'm from Philadelphia. I have family members who have been impacted by the system, loved ones, and I'm excited to be a part of this conversation because I'm always looking for ideas and to aid in the conversation to move the needle forward for our folks.
Absolutely, absolutely, and thank you so much for that, and thank you guys all for the work that you do. I think those introductions are a great segue into one of the first questions, which is really to elaborate on what you guys have already said. You gave great introductions into your roles and what you guys work on, but can you guys each talk a little bit about your organization's role, particularly as it relates to voter engagement for the carceral community? And if you aren't focused primarily on that work, it's totally fine. But I know each of us has played a pivotal role in moving the needle, no matter how big or small. It's all been pivotal in order to get us to where we are in this work. So let's start back with Brittany, and then we'll go to Tanisha, and then to Miracle.
Most certainly, as I mentioned, we currently partner with organizations in the Allegheny County area to go into the Allegheny County prisons to make sure that folks receive their mail-in ballots, as well as prior to that, making sure folks were registered in the prison. We want to make sure that they understand their rights. We want to make sure that folks are educated and have the opportunity to participate in the process. The voices of our most vulnerable population is so important, and we've known in the past how people have made it hard to restrict them for and try to treat them as non-citizens, and we just want to just make sure that, and also supporting you, Lee, in your efforts to get certain bills passed, so rallying at the Capitol on behalf of our vulnerable population. So we're constantly in the fight. um is a very important cause. There's something that we talked about getting emancipated, and but we don't got to talk about it in this call. But we're reimagining every single day on how we can support again our most vulnerable population.
Absolutely. Tanisha?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things when I first came on to both ALC and Straight Ahead that really concerned me, especially in Allegheny County, is how very little people understood about the right for currently and formerly incarcerated people to vote. There are a lot of beliefs that people who have had felonies but are no longer incarcerated aren't eligible to vote. There was a huge misunderstanding about the right of people who are currently incarcerated to vote, especially when we're talking about jails. as opposed to prisons, where your likelihood is a little bit less when it comes to being convicted of felony and being able to vote. So we have actually like really pitched in and amped up our efforts in regards to voter education for people who are currently and formerly incarcerated. We do that both inside and outside of the ACJ. Registering people to vote who are incarcerated is literally one of my favorite things in the world to do. We also like to educate people around what they're voting for, like the importance of judicial elections. We like to educate people about how different levers of power within our local governments affect them. And we found that, even doing things such as educating them on, their ability to be picked for a jury just by being registered to vote can impact them in different ways. So our efforts are kind of like first building understanding and then building mobilization. A lot of people believe that, the president is the only thing that we vote for. And when they see that doesn't really change things for them in the way that they thought they would, they disinvest from the process, period. So we kind of take a more localistic approach, and we get people to understand that not only can they vote, but they can also participate in civic systems, and that they can actually get themselves elected as well.
Absolutely. Miracle?
Yeah, and just building off of what Brittany and Tanisha said, what's One Hood Power, we are a 501c4 organization. We have the fortunate opportunity to endorse elected officials, people and candidates that are running for office, as well as partner with them for programming. So some of the things that we do is in our questionnaire, we ask them about their beliefs and understandings about the criminal justice system. We talk to them about, the school to prison pipeline. We talk to them about carceral systems and how they can divest, from death and support communities. In addition, what we do is for our people who are impacted, our people who are coming home, we radically invite them into our organization. We host community events, education events about the right, as you said, the right to vote, because a lot of people do not understand. We also have to raise up that disinformation is by design, right? When we look at what happened in Florida, how people who just received, the right to vote were targeted and threatened with arrest. We understand that whether it's Pennsylvania, Virginia, people who have received the right to vote should be able to vote. And so we push that information out. We do media campaigns that people know they have the right to vote. We engage our partners. We sometimes will go into the jails. We do hope for next year for our district attorney race. We're trying to have a district attorney forum within the local jail, because we believe people who are included in the system should also be able to ask questions and see what people have to say about their community. And those are some of the things that we do because we think it's really, really important that everyone within the Commonwealth be able to exercise the right to vote. And we also want people to understand that just because they have a sentence of incarceration, they are not second-class citizens. They have their full free right to engage in the political process, and they should.
1000%. Thank you guys so much. That was a lot. And it was very profound. And Tanisha, something that you said really resonated with me. Again, as a formerly incarcerated person and, someone who's been doing political advocacy and has moved into criminal justice reform advocacy over the last 7 years, but again, have been doing political campaigns for over 20 years. I came out off Rikers Island with a felony conviction and, didn't, back then, this was 2002, you had to still check the box, right? You still had to report that you had been incarcerated over the last 7 years. And frankly, it was very difficult to find employment. I mean, forget about a meaningful career, right? And so being engaged with the electorate for me, because I didn't vote when I was a kid, when I was young, between like 18 and like 24, I did not vote. But being engaged in the electoral process didn't just change my mindset in terms of, okay, Obama got elected, whatever. But for me, it actually became something that saved my life by giving me another career, right? And seeing that, if you're willing to put in some work, like you can get on a political campaign and make a career out of that and get to a point where you're able to lift up these particular kinds of issues. And we're starting to see a lot more of that. But 25 years ago, we weren't talking about mass incarceration the way we are now. We were able to talk about it. So that really resonated with me when you said, a lot of times our folks get caught up in the presidential elections, not understanding that all voting really is local, and that the elections that matter the most, particularly to our people, are going to be the hyper local elections that a lot of times most of us, because my family members ask me all the time, don't even really understand who's running and what they're about. Right. So that's just a really important component in terms of the voter education piece, where folks just really need to understand who they're voting for, what these people's track records are. And so I'm just really glad that these kinds of things are being brought up, because we're trying to address them at the grassroots level, at the legislative level, at the county level. Right. And so there's all these different kinds of facets. And sometimes things get lost in translation. So I'm really happy that, this is being sort of talked about in other parts of the state. So let's move on. On May 20th, the primary election ballot, there are several ballot questions that voters will have the opportunity to bring into law. Miracle, can you talk a little bit about the ballot measures to whatever extent you feel comfortable, and maybe give a brief overview of what they mean?
Yes. So here in Pittsburgh, we have 3 ballot measures, and one of them is about our ability to keep our water public, and the other is about, geopolitical issues. So I'll start with the first one. The first one is whether or not we want our water to stay public here in the city of Pittsburgh. If you look all across the country, we understand that private equity has really tried to extract and plunder every single resource that it can. And one of the last ones is water. And so our second ballot question is asking whether or not, our water should be public. And so I put together a little graphic. People should vote no on the first measure, yes on the second measure, and no on the last measure, right? Just for more context, for ballot measure number 1, about measure number 3, there was a grassroots effort to encourage the city to divest from entities like Israel and the UAE who commit genocide abroad, right? And there was this idea and belief that if you do business with the city, you should be in line with the city charter. And you should not be committing genocide. You should not be committing human rights violations and abuses abroad than being able to work with the city. In response to that, one of the council people introduced these 2 legislative acts because, going back to what our first presenter said, people need to know how ballot measures become ballots, right? One of the ways that ballot measures become ballots is you do a referendum, you have people sign signatures, it gets approved, and then it gets on the ballot. The other way is our city council introduces legislation to become ballot referendums, and if the majority of people on council vote in the affirmative, it is placed on the ballot. And so we have 2 ballot measures that went through that way. The first ballot measure is simply, in what I say, in my opinion, is trying to say that you get a non-discrimination protection if you are a organization or a corporate entity that works and does work abroad with a nation state that the university or the city will work with locally. That, in my opinion, is similar to Citizens United, where it gives corporations protection from being held accountable for the bad things that they do here and elsewhere by saying they're a protected entity and a protected class. And at the end of the day, we do not need more billionaires and more corporations to have protections as they extract resources and harm and devastate our community. So for ballot measure number 1, said no. For ballot measure number 3, it's also a no because it basically limits and hampers your ability to engage in direct democracy. And our opinion, our stance as an organization is that anything that limits democracy goes against our values, right? And anything that says that you cannot access the ballot box should not be anything that we support and vote for. And so that is why we put out a graphic that is no, yes, no, with the snaps. And I do also want to say that we are in a time of rising fascism. We talk about being people who've been impacted by the carceral state. If you look at, Angela Davis, who told us prison does not disappear problems, it disappears people. What is going on right now with the increase of fascism? While violent crime is actually at a decrease, we now have people trying to pass legislation that puts people in prison. Recently there was a bill on the federal level that was trying to say that if you protest, right, and if you engage in protest, you should be arrested and possibly jailed, for life for protesting and engaging in non-violent, non-criminal protests, but based on who you are protesting against. And it's our position that because the state is often the source for our pain and suffering, we should always be able to protest government action. We should always be able to protest government overreach, and there should be no restrictions on the people's right to directly engage and can confront government and state violence. And so for us, it is very important that when we're looking at legislation, we do not pass or introduce legislation that creates a track record to incarcerate more people. And that is also, what these ballot measures do.
Thank you, Miracle. That is a lot. And that's why we wanted to do this, because those things they are not easy to understand. And even as someone like myself, I consider myself pretty politically informed. Sometimes I get to those ballot questions and I'm like, I should have prepared for this a little sooner. And that's also true with some of the judicial races. One of the things I've noticed in my tenure in this work is that you'll find that a lot of judicial candidates have trouble getting the word and message out about their candidacy. Supreme Court justices can't even campaign, right? But these judges are the ones that really hold people's lives in the palm of their hands. And in terms of the carceral community, I have to say it will behoove us to really understand, if none else, those particular elections and the district attorney's races. So before we move on, I want to make sure that there isn't anyone else on the panel that wants to respond or to elaborate on what Miracle has said. Okay.
The only thing I would say in regards to the ballot measures, and it's just backing up Miracle's point, is we should always be wary when council tries to enact measures or pass ballots that take rights away from the people. We should always be democracy forward. We should always be against measures that lead to further passive incarceration. And we should always be looking at these critically. You only get, I believe, like 70 words or something to put in a ballot measure. And they are usually worded in ways that are so hyper deceptive that you believe you are voting for something entirely different. If you read ballot question 1 or 3, you would believe that you were supposed to vote yes on them because you were falling on the side of, equality and democracy, and that you were the type of person who just wanted things to run correctly. But if you read the full measure, that's where you see that, the devil's in the details. And it is, it is 100% contingent on us as activists and as educators and as leaders to make sure that people really understand what they're voting for. And a lot of people go to these ballot boxes with, a high lack of education on what they're really looking at. And they rely on us and they rely on your friends and your family members to kind of just tell them who and what to vote for. And I'm very comfortable doing that. You will see me post statuses that, ballot question cheat sheets, no, yes, no. And if anyone asks me to elaborate, I absolutely will do that. But some people just need the handhold as to what to do.
No, absolutely. And so do you guys think, and feel free anyone to jump in there, do you guys think that there's a level of, do you think the way that some of these ballot questions are worded, do you think it's intentional the way they're so difficult to understand? Does someone want to jump on that? Everybody say
pass if they weren't. Like, they wouldn't pass if they weren't. They wouldn't pass, I don't think they would have gotten the votes on council to pass if they weren't. I think that, anytime you're trying to pass legislation, you wrap it in the way that is most favorable to your cause, and you wrap it in the way that is most favorable to people's understanding and their ability to be easily manipulated. There's no reality in which voters would respond yes to a ballot measure that said, are you okay with taking away another tool for which you can exercise your democracy? Nobody would agree to that. Are you okay with, us pretending that something is a diversity forward initiative when in reality it really empowers these companies and gives them more say and ability than the average voter? Nobody would vote yes to that, so they just trick us.
Yep. That's why
that is the function of white supremacy. I think we have to be like really, really honest, right? Particularly as Black people, particularly as people who are impacted by the justice system. This system was not meant for us. It was meant to bury us, but we are seeds and we sprouted, right? We are the rows that grew from concrete. And so we're able to build and we're able to engage. But at the end of the day, so many of our people have fallen by the wayside because it is these ballot measures that are written deceptively that incarcerate our people, that increase, sentences, right? When you talk to people, even today, when we debate the crime bill, everybody's like, well, we didn't know what the crime bill actually meant, right? We didn't know what the crime bill would do. And a part of that is these corporations, right? These corporate entities write legislation because they profit off of our pain and suffering. They profit off of incarceration. I was talking to a group of kids and he was like, what do you mean people make millions of dollars because I go to jail? And I was like, listen, if you have socks in jail, that's a contract. If you use a tablet in jail, that's a contract. If you have food in jail, that's a contract. If you make a phone call in jail, that's a contract, right? If you are fortunate enough to be sent home on house arrest, you have to pay someone to monitor you. You have to pay someone to have that ankle bracelet on. These are contracts. We are making people millions and billions of dollars because of the way this legislation is written that destroys our communities and takes away our rights. So yes, it is 100% intentional to have deceptive language on these ballot measures, and on legislation that our elected officials vote for, who sometimes only have a couple of hours to read before they vote on it.
Yeah, and civic engagement isn't happening in the way that it should, or the way that it even used to when we had people storming the polls. Civic classes aren't even being taught. I always joke and I'm like, open the schools, the kids are being left behind. But at this point, there's no interest in doing that because they want us to be stupid. They want us to be ignorant. They want pliable voters who will do the things that, they want them to do. Common sense isn't common anymore. And we're electing people based on ignorance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, couldn't be more apparent in the times that we're living in. But this is great, and I wanna pivot a little bit and just talk a little bit about voter engagement, specifically for incarcerated people inside county facilities, particularly in Pennsylvania. And I know, Brittany, I know you're doing some great work in Allegheny County. I believe all of you guys are doing great work inside that facility, if I'm not mistaken. But I'd love to hear about what you guys are seeing inside county facilities in the way of voter engagement. Are the administrations being supportive? Is there a fight? When you get inside the facilities, are you able to really, give the educational component, or is it just voter registration? What has that been looking like for you guys?
I can give Brittany a second and answer this one. So League of Women Voters, BPEP, Black Voters Matter, a lot of organizations really banded together to, reach out to the jail and create a relationship where they are able to actually go in, do voter registration, be assisted, have them process applications, and get them to the county elections office, where before, in past administrations, we did not have that. There was a lot of unwillingness to let us inside the jails to do that registration. And there has definitely been a softening in the last few years, especially in Allegheny County, towards making sure that everybody is able to exercise their civic duty. A lot of that can be attributed to the work from those nonprofit organizations. Some of it did start before County Executive Inamorado's tenure, but it has ramped up and been a collaborative process since she's come into office. As someone who has gone in and registered people to vote in the jail, they love seeing us there. Not the jail admin as much. Some of them actually do like seeing us there, and it's really a weird switch from before. But the incarcerated people actually really do like to hear, not just to have that human connection, but they like to hear, hey, we want you to vote because we think your voice is important, and we are willing to take the time to get you registered. We are willing to explain the process to you, and we're willing to explain to you what's on your ballot. We do that effort in a nonpartisan way. So a lot of people like to say that we're going in there to like get votes for Danny or anything like that. But really we go in there as like C3s, and we just get people to register to vote. And it's actually been really great. And I think more counties need to adopt a proactive measure. League of Women Voters has videos on the tablets where people can find out about elections. A lot has changed.
Yeah.
I like to piggyback off Tanisha. And what I would say is that, like, incarcerated citizens and like people, the most vulnerable populations within our communities, when you have so many restrictions and things that you have to focus on beyond civic education, that you haven't been able to connect it to your way into liberation, sometimes it can be a little tough. So with the ACJ, I think there has been phenomenal changes made, but again, there are other issues outside of this civic advocacy that Tanisha and her organization has done phenomenal things to see those changes and advocate for our incarcerated citizens, that can sometimes be a barrier when you're introducing this. Like, for the most part, like Tanisha said, folks are, interested to have that human connection. But when you're having these conversations, again, like I said, this is the overarching issue, because that's one of the, like, that facility is like trash. Like, I'm sorry, I just had to say it like that. Like, and I mean, I just think that all of these barriers are put in place again to keep us uneducated. Like, it's like the blight in our communities that we see. It's like, why should I vote? My neighborhood look like this. Our schools look like this. Our facilities look like this. So it's like there is a lot of work that needs to be done on the back end to get more folks engaged. Like, when we recently we registered 33 people, um, and I think that it could have been 66 people if we didn't have so many barriers, in terms of the way that the issues that they have to deal with internally inside those institutions.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's
I
no.
just want to interject. This is Miracle. Can I just say, it's absolutely ludicrous that you have to register to vote in a country where voting is your constitutional right. That in itself is a barrier. Voting should be like automatic. We should never have to worry about losing our right to vote, right? We should never have to worry about, is my signature legible enough, right? Am I going to be able enough to hold a pen correctly in order to vote? What we still have, and I will say that I view voter registration as a modern day poll tax. I view it as this barrier in order to engage in the system, because, and now you have to have, in some places you have to have an ID, you have to have a proof of address that is no longer just mail. Like, when I was growing up, I'm still older, when I was growing up, it was just any piece of mail. You had a legitimate piece of mail that you yourself did not create, that was going to prove that you lived the address. Now, if you live with someone, or if you are married, or if you're a student in a dorm, you may not have, mail a bill in your name, depending on how your financial situation is set up. So if you're homeless, if you're transient, if you are a new immigrant, or you're a new person, a new young adult person who hasn't established yourself, you do not have the necessary tools. And I saw a tweet the other day that said, let's not forget, people from Katrina never got their documents back, right? So when we talk about these environmental disasters that force people to flee from their homes, and we don't have a system that allows people to get their documents back, we turn on the TV and we see our elders who are in their 90s and 100s can't get IDs because they never got their correct papers because of the racism in this country. I think we have to talk about just registering to vote, like Brittany was saying, is like a barrier. And the part of it is that voting, for all the things that come with negative outcome of voting is the single most powerful tool that we have at our disposal. I was listening to The Ballot and the Bullet by Malcolm X, and he was talking about like how the ballot is one way to have a bloodless revolution, right? One way to change people's lives without hurting any person is by going to the ballot box. And that is why it is so hard and so difficult for our people to vote. That is why their people spend millions of dollars to depress and disenfranchise our communities, because if every single one of us vote, we could literally change the whole conditions of not only our communities, but this country within a single election.
Absolutely. That's so powerful. It kind of gave me chills, y'all. Thank you for this information for our audience. Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is that if voting didn't matter the way, sometimes we hear our folks talk about, how's it voting going to change my situation? If it wasn't important, if it wasn't powerful, these people wouldn't be trying so hard to keep us from doing it, and I want people to know that. I want people to remember that we got Act 111, Act 77 in 2020, so now we can mail in our ballots with no excuse. You don't have to have a reason. You can just mail it in. You can go online, you can request the ballot, they'll send it to you, you fill it out, and you mail it right back to them. You don't even have to go into the polling location anymore. And one really quick thing, I remember last year, in my role as a prison society, I was fielding some calls and some inquiries from folks that were having trouble with accessing the franchise. I got a call from a pastor who, one of their parishioners is formerly incarcerated, did some decades, but was being told by their PO that because they were a 5-time felon, that they couldn't vote, and that because they were on house arrest, if he tried to walk to the polling location, the PO threatened to arrest him. So I ended up getting the PO's information, and I emailed him and cited statute to let him know that as long as that individual isn't currently serving time for that felony conviction, they're home, they can vote. And it's illegal for you to tell him he can't and try and stop him from doing that. And so he did allow the gentleman to go vote that day. But if I hadn't have emailed him, that would have been a lost vote. Now, my question was, after that, how many POs are telling their clients the same thing? And my guess would be a lot. Right. And so there's all these different silos that we don't even always think about until we come across where folks are being constantly disenfranchised, constantly being fed misinformation about the franchise. And again, it just shows that this work is vital if we're going to be able to build power and deal with our issues. So real quick, I want to stay kind of on this. And I kind of started talking about it just now, but I'd love to hear from folks just to kind of continue in this vein. Like, we really want our folks to vote, right? We really want our folks to be connected with the electorate, and not just the carceral community, but families, their friends, right? Because every one of us knows someone that's in jail right now or has been in jail. You know what I mean? And so if you touch the person that has direct impact, then you're able to a lot of times get their friends and their family. I just want to talk about ways in which this tool, voter engagement, how can we use this tool to address some of the inadequacies in our community? And again, we've been kind of talking about it a little bit, on the surface, but can we kind of just dig in for a few minutes about how electoral engagement, and part of it, right, is voting on ballot measures. Part of it is voting for the right candidates. But I'm also thinking about creating a pipeline into the advocacy space for our people, with voter engagement being sort of the starting point for that. Can folks talk a little bit about some of that stuff?
Yeah, so I think one, it's very important to say, first of all, in Pennsylvania, we are one of 7 places in the whole entire country that elects every single one of our judges, from our magistrate to our Supreme Court. And the reason that is important, it was a judge who ruled that if you commit a felony, you cannot run for higher office in Pennsylvania. That was not direct legislation that the people we elected put into office. It was a judge who said a crime of infamy is a felony, and therefore you cannot run for office. So one, I think we first have to let people know the impact of their vote and why it's important. The second is, I think we build a pipeline from people who are impacted, right? There are whole systems of support that people need once they're incarcerated. I can tell you almost every week someone calls me and is like, I have a friend at the Allegheny County Jail. I have a loved one at the Allegheny County Jail. Who do I call? How do I put money on the books? How do I visit? What is the bailout procedures, right? And so what we've been able to do in Allegheny County is find, people at different spaces within the electoral system to engage, right? There are some people who are totally divested from the electoral system, but they believe in mutual aid. And so what that looks like is there are people who feed people. There are people who make sure people have bus tickets when they get out of jail. There are people who make sure that they can call people's jobs on their behalf to say they're not coming in. People who pay people's, bail and bond. There's also people who offer childcare, people who give food, who give clothing, who give shelter, right? And so I think what we can do, particularly with those who are impacted by the criminal justice system, is we have people in a place where they, it's a bad phrase, but for better or worse, they are a captive audience, right? They are the best organizers that we're ever going to have a chance of engaging, right? So educating them, letting them know about the right to vote, what's on the ballot, how they can vote, how they can engage. Then they can let their family and friends know. And though as they're letting their family and friends know what's on the ballot, we can provide resources and support for them as they are on the outside. And I think that creates a pipeline where we have people who are, like Bethany Hallam, who came through the incarceration system, who was very, open up front about living with an addiction disorder, and who ran for a county office as one of the youngest people to win in the county in the whole United States and in Pennsylvania for the type of seat that she has, right? So I think our pipeline is finding people where they are, giving them the information and tools and resources that they need to be okay, and then radically inviting them into the system so that if they want to be their own advocate and run for office, they can.
Absolutely.
I think Miracle kind of says it best. Your most credible messengers are people who have experienced it, right? And people are more comfortable being credible messengers when you have created spaces where they feel safe and comfortable to tell their story, and where they feel safe and comfortable participating. One of my biggest pet peeves with people who engage in, civic engagement work and voting work is that they show up during elections, but they're not there in the in-between times. They're not doing the work to figure out how we can empower people. They are not doing the work to figure out how we can help the community outside of just the goals of voting. A lot of times people are not doing the work to do the ongoing education required to make people understand that, the changes we seek to see aren't always instant. So a lot of people get discouraged and beat down when they, do their first vote. They get the person they want, and they're surprised that in 2 years things have not changed. We have to build that infrastructure so that people understand, like, okay, we made it to one goalpost, but there are going to be a lot more, and you're going to see changes that are incremental. And you have to keep those wins like in your pocket so that you remember that you've done them. A lot of work I do is with the county jail, and there are a lot of things that absolutely need to change there. And sometimes I forget how much we have already accomplished. And when I sit back and I look at it, I'm like, oh, wow, I really am that girl. We did a lot. But that doesn't happen unless you have people around you who are reminding you of the changes that we've already achieved and what we stand to lose. I think that we don't train people to not just, spread a message, tell their own story, but also move past that step and be like active participants. What Bethany Hallam did is absolutely amazing. She, became the person she wanted to see making the laws and making the changes. But a lot of other people who are formerly incarcerated have that ability too, and they just aren't taught how to do it. And I think people would be more excited to engage in civic processes if they could see themselves in those seats and positions and making those laws. A lot of people don't know that to be a magistrate, you don't even need a law degree. You really, there's like a 6-week course you can take and you can be a magistrate, but you also can then use that as a jumping point to become a lawyer or become a judge in the future. So I think that, we have to do our responsibility of, making sure this work is not short-lived and it's not election to election, it's year round. And if that is, your calling, then that's what you need to be doing.
Mm-hmm. You said something really.
Both. Oh, sorry.
Real quick, Brittany, before you guys, want to say you said something really profound, Tanisha, about really, I guess, putting our folks in positions to be able to thrive. And I'm thinking about the formerly incarcerated people, the folks that have done decades in prison that have come home, and they've been seen doing press conferences with district attorneys, right? They've been seen with state representatives, right? What you said was we have to be able to see ourselves in these positions. I think that's so profound, because how many of us in our teens and 20s didn't care about voting? Because we don't see how it matters to us. And it's not, and again, it goes back to we don't just see, it doesn't just not matter to us in terms of voting. It doesn't matter to us in terms of even believing or thinking that we can have a seat at the table. And I think that is one of the most important things about this work, is that it shows that if we do it right, not only can we have a seat at the table, we can have our own table that people will have to sit at, and we'll be able to allow them to sit at if we want. I'm sorry, Brittany.
No, I agree with both of the ladies said, and I just want to add to it, like really movement building is so important, and locking arms, especially in the Black community. A lot of the times, folks can't see themselves in those positions because they have not been given the tools from the people who have the experience, or even being uplifted to feel like they matter in the situation and they have something to attribute. So I think that doing some self digging in terms of the Black community and how we can thrive and really, come together, coalition building is going to be key to us really getting moving the needle forward.
I want to say something controversial.
Can I say
I
something
want to be a little.
before you
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I will say, you have great examples right now of formerly incarcerated people who are, sitting at those tables and doing the work. One of the people I would love to shout out is my executive director, Salim. When we say, people who have spent decades in prison, he's absolutely that person. And now you see him testifying in Harrisburg. You see him, on transition teams, you see him in places where you just aren't used to seeing people with his type of story. And I think right now, one of the most effective things he's doing is just breaking every single belief and stereotype about formerly incarcerated people and people who have had second chances. There will be people who have had second chances who will not make the best of their second chance. And that can never be a reflection on everyone who's doing great work, who has had second chances. And I think Salim's a great example of that.
Indeed.
Okay, so I want to be more controversial than what Tanisha said, but I think that we have a felon in the White House, right? People can see themselves right now because the most powerful person on the planet is someone who is a criminally justice involved person, right? I think that we should have conversations about why he can be the president, but people who not had a criminal record in 20 years cannot run for school board in Pennsylvania because they haven't received a pardon yet. I think when we're talking about, what people are seeing themselves, it's that they really need to have an opportunity to do the work. The fact that people with criminal backgrounds, or as Terry Meyer Spitzer says, colorful backgrounds, can volunteer 24/7. They can get all these positions where they do not get paid. But once they try to get a position that comes with a salary and benefits, the law says they cannot do that. I think that is a problem, and it's an injustice, right? So I do think that there is a way for us to argue that we need to have more people who with lived experiences involved in our systems, right? But I also think when we talk about building coalitions, one of the things that always breaks my heart when people come home and they spent a decade in prison and they don't know how to use a computer or a cell phone. And my thing is what are our prisons doing? How are they failing people that they're not preparing people to come home? They're not preparing people to have literacy. They're not preparing people to have emotional intelligence. They're not preparing people for a skill so they can continue the cycle of incarceration. So I would also say that part of our pipeline has to be making sure that our people who are still locked behind the wall have opportunities to better themselves, have opportunities to have an actual education, actual job training, actual skills, and not as a means of a carrot and a stick, but as a means that because they're in these institutions, that these institutions should be in the business of reforming and not punishing people, regardless of how long their sentence is, or regardless of what title that they have, on their docket sheet. Because I think it is just an abomination. I remember one time when I was acting in my public defender capacity, I was sitting with someone, and a part of his ability to get, early release was that he had a GED, will get a GED. He had already been in there more than half his time. And he was like, I cannot go to GED class because I'm considered, a violent criminal. And because I'm illiterate, I am not able to get the training to have the class to be able to go home. And so it's these type of scenarios that our people inside are facing. So that's also a thing that I do believe that we have to advocate for, is the conditions for our people who are on the inside.
One thing I will say, because I don't believe what Miracle said is that controversial, but my only caveat is that Trump is a felon, but Trump is a white felon. And one of the things that I think is different with Trump, and that we really do need to do a lot of community education on, is he's a white felon, and he is a white felon with money. And yes, a lot of our community members, especially in the Black community, the Black male community, see that we have a felon in office and they think that can be them, when that is not something that will be realistically extended to Black people anytime in the near future. They believe we deserve to be in jail. They believe he deserves to be in the White House. They believe what happened to him was unfair. And they believe that what happened to them is protecting the community from Black people. I think that, in an ideal world, we would do the things that Miracle talks about, and, carceral systems would serve more of a rehabilitative purpose. But as they operate now, they just simply don't. And I do believe part of that is 100% by design. They expect to see you back in those institutions because they make money from you. They make money by incarcerating you. They, keep people in power by keeping you out of the streets. They thrive off of breaking up our homes and breaking up our families. So we have deeper issues to address, but Trump is 100% in the White House because he is a white felon. And I believe that there are many white felons who are afforded those same paths to forgiveness and luxuries that, Black people and brown people who have committed similar crimes will never be afforded without deep change in this country.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that if the majority of the prison population was made up of white people, the criminal justice system would not be the way it was. It would not be the way it is. Me and my colleagues, we go into the prisons regularly, SCIs and counties alike, and they're all inadequate. They're killing people. They're making people worse off than they were when they went in, right? And so again, if the majority of people being incarcerated were white, prisons would not be the way they are. Mass incarceration would not be what it is. And so, yeah, I mean, we can't talk about this without naming the role of systemic and institutional racism in our current situation, and why incarceration and why our folks have so many barriers post incarceration. Like you said, it's designed to bring you back into the system. And with that, I'll ask folks, and feel free to just jump in terms of like going into the facilities. What are you seeing in terms of the apathy around voting? Are you seeing folks that are like jumping on the opportunity? Are you having to have a lot of conversations with folks about why it's important and having to do deep dives to convince people that it's important? Or are people like more willing to engage?
I think what Tanisha said in terms of the human contact and experience that they're having with just because some of these folks don't have visitation at all, don't have any family on the outside. So it's like, that level of engagement, but you can't, there's still a lot of barriers and restrictions that you have as an outsider coming into these facilities. So it's like a time frame. So you have limited opportunity to kind of make your case. So you got to kind of narrow it down and give them the meat so that
Mhm.
they're able to understand like why it is important for them to participate, but it's still a deeper dive that needs to be had. So the good thing about it is that these trips happen multiple times. So you're going in to help them with the ballot application. So if we're strategic enough as advocates going into these facilities, then we'll be able to say, all right, this go around, this is how we're going to operate. And then the second time when we go in for voter registration, this is how we're going to operate. So you got to be very strategic with the limited time that we have.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think my experience going into the jails, and I also participate with the Colorful Backgrounds program, teaching the civic engagement course to formerly incarcerated people, is there is always pushback. There is always pushback, like, this has never worked for me before. Why would I care about that? But even with that pushback, you just have to be the right type of messenger to overcome some of those objections. I genuinely enjoy doing that. I'll argue with anybody. Everybody knows that. But it's not always argumentative. Some people just genuinely don't see the connections between themselves and making change in democracy. You have some people who will just register a vote just because you ask them, and they just want somebody to talk to. And then you have people who will give you pushback and they enjoy the game and the argumentation. But so far, in my attempts to register people to vote, both in the jail and even during the Colorful Backgrounds courses, I have probably a 95% success rate, if not higher, because if you take the time to get to know what's important to a person, you can find a connection to civic engagement and voting, whether it's, I don't like how my judge treated me. Okay, great. You have the opportunity to elect more. I feel like my jury was prejudiced. Why isn't anyone from your community in it? Are they not registered to vote? I hate the sheriff. Okay, go be the sheriff. There's always a connection and there's always a way. But I think the thing that rings true the most is when you tell people that if voting weren't so important, they wouldn't work so hard to make sure you couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of gets them there.
Yep. And we're starting to wind down. I know we don't have a whole lot of time left. I want to kind of get one or two quick questions in before we check with the audience and see if they have any questions for us. And if you do have questions, audience, feel free to drop them in the chat. I know someone had requested the handles of our panelists. What we'll do is, before we close out, we'll have each of the panelists give out their contact information so that if you guys want to reach out to them, that you're able to do so. But I want to see real quick, based on what I'm hearing, how can you guys talk about how, I know the answer, but I want our audience to hear the answer. How have elected officials, politicians, judges, how have they perpetuated, you can talk about individual offices or as a whole, how has politics perpetuated mass incarceration?
Whew.
This was a quick question.
The crime bill, baby. The people who passed legislation to say we go to jail, right? I think that I tell people all the time, you gotta think about, there has been over 8,000 new bills passed to incarcerate people just in the past 2 years alone. A lot of that has been around protests, right? Think about how many bills have been introduced to stop people's right to protest just because they think a genocide is happening. How many times we are talking about people cannot smoke in certain areas, people cannot wear certain types of clothes in certain areas. Now you can't hold your phone when you're driving. All these things are new pieces of legislation that serve one function. It isn't safety. It's to increase incarceration, right? And so that is how people go there and use their elected status to incarcerate people. But I want to take the time to uplift people like Summer Lee, who use their position to storm the rostrum, to sit there and say we have to hold our police accountable for when they're committing crimes and killing people, that we have to allow people to have second chances, that we have to provide housing and health care, that we have to support our people who are coming home, that we have to invest in community, that we have to invest in clean air and the environment. So yes, we know there are elected officials who are bent on, being, white supremacists with, a button up and a suit and tie. But there are people like Summer Lee who every day get up and fight for her community to make sure they have a better week, a better future, a better year. And I think that's also really important to uplift as well.
I'm heavy on the support Summer Lee train. I think that there are very few people in Congress who are willing to put it all on the line for the things that they believe in. So many people are so worried about getting elected and remaining electable that they just stray so far from their values that you don't recognize them anymore. Fetterman, even though I said that's always who he was, but that's important. And when we talk about, what has led to mass incarceration, what politicians, what laws, you have things like in California where, they moved to make it illegal to be homeless. And then they extended that nationwide. The Supreme Court took it up. And you see these little bricks that are being built to get them closer to their goal, which is to make it so that the laws that apply to everyday people like me, you and me, only apply to everyday people like you and me. Police have qualified immunity. We have special classes of, elected officials and police officers and public servants, as they call them, who, a crime against them is given an enhancement. It's all about societal control. It's all about making it easier to go from your home to the jailhouse. I told the story today about how I lost my driver's license for 12 years. And there are provisions in PA's driver's licensing laws where I could have gone to jail just for driving, and it wasn't DUI related. There are so many nonsensical laws that are built to put you closer to incarceration because you're easier to control that way. And once you have that record, you slowly see yourself being removed from civic society and public participation.
Which is
and
the goal.
Even to add, because my sisters, both of them have so eloquently stated that, but prison gerrymandering is a huge issue where the resources that belong to the community and the families that support the families that are incarcerated are going to those areas where they're housed. So that's further taking away resources from a community, further disenfranchising the community that has now we're going into an issue where now we just opening folks the door for more people to be incarcerated.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for those answers. I mean, I really think, and I hope and pray that our audience is getting a lot out of this, because I sure am. And, we all need sort of sometimes a refresher and a little bit of push and motivation to keep that burnout at bay. Because the reality is we live in Pennsylvania. And if you do any work in Harrisburg, you know how difficult it is to get anything passed in the state legislature. I will mention briefly, based on something that I heard, that our legislative measure, our bill that would create the processes and procedures for voting for incarcerated individuals, addresses a issue that was mentioned, which is that when you're incarcerated, sometimes you may not have a home. So one of the provisions in our bill would make it so you be able to use an intersection essentially as an address. If you're without room and board, you could use, an intersection or a cross street in order to do that. There's some other really good things in that bill as well that make voting easier. And that's the goal here. We want to make this easier for folks and not harder. So as we wind down, I'm going to throw out one more question for folks. And again, if you have questions from the audience, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. But I'd just love to hear from everyone before we close out. What kind of support is needed in order to continue to perpetuate this work and really be able to address all of the things that we have to address, all the things that we talked about today. What kind of support do your various organizations need personally, professionally? How can we move this thing forward? What is needed most?
Money. And I think the PENNfranchise needs to be fully funded so that it can be a really, because the work that you're doing is needed, but it takes money. Yeah. And they need to be fully funded.
Yep. Without question. Thank you.
So Brittany, you can hire the right team. So it's not just you 24 hours a day burning the midnight oil trying to move the needle forward. That's been my word today, moving the needle forward.
Good word. No, money. You can't do anything without money. As long as money is in politics, as long as you need money to travel and to print materials, you can't do anything in this country without money. So yeah, absolutely. Anything else that folks want to lift up in terms of support needed? One thing I'll say is that I know, particularly in Philly, it may not seem like it, but we always need more boots on the ground, particularly for going door to door and for lifting up candidates, but mostly issues. And you find it more difficult to get people to buy into this work, because a lot of times people are asking you, to volunteer. Like Brittany said, we need money, but like trying to get boots on the ground is difficult for a bunch of reasons. One of which is that people are used to being told that you have to volunteer, you have to do this for free, but also because it's harder and harder to, even when you are paying somebody, to pay somebody a substantial wage. So there are all these sort of barriers, to get people to buy in to this work. I've been seeing. Is there anything else that people want to lift up in terms of barriers?
I would say, go ahead, Tanisha.
No, yeah.
I would say, since Tanisha brought up Fetterman, one of the things that also makes it harder is trying to find actual people who care, right? And so that's why I'm thankful that we have people like Ed Gainey, who's running for re-election tomorrow, who was someone who did not switch up once he got into office, and who still stayed, committed and rooted in community. But I do think that sometimes people get frustrated. There's this whole conversation right now about Black fatigue and how tired Black people are just because they have to get up every day and fight, and they just want to be able to live, rest, and relax, right? And so I do think that part of it is boots on the ground. It's always going to be money. We got to fund our revolution, y'all. But I think it's also celebrating the wins. When we win, we have to be loud, proud, and unapologetic about, our wins and the ways that we're able to keep our community safe, that we're able to keep our communities housed. We have to give people, something to vote for, something to believe in. And I do think that it's just like bad news 24/7. It's so hard to see something positive. And so I do think that, like, showing people the changes, telling your story, Leigh, I think it gives people motivation to know that there is life after prison, there is life after incarceration, and there is people who are willing to hire you and support you, so you don't have to keep on that same cycle. I think once you give people those opportunities to change, they will. But I do think it comes down to giving people, a living wage. And I will even say, passing things like single payer, passing things like right to shelter, passing legislation that demands people have livable wages, but also demands that we have a basic safety net. I think it also gives people room to breathe. So once we start getting these real life-changing legislative wins on the books, I think people will just be flocking in to be boots on the ground and to do what is needed to keep our society progressing.
Yes.
I think the thing that we need most is education. Of people who are ignorant are people who are controlled. And that's just what they're going to rely on. If we rely on the government, and if we rely on these schools, and if we rely on these teachers to tell people exactly what their civic responsibility, duty, or, rights are, then we are not going to get anywhere. We know that we're fighting misinformation. We know that we're fighting intentional campaigns of disinformation. And we need to make sure that we are educating not just ourselves, but the people around us. And we have to make sure that people are not only willing to have these conversations, but eager to have these conversations. And we can't be afraid to be those messengers. Like, that is one of the biggest hurdles and problems that we run into. Some people choose to be dumb. And that is not, I love to say, that's not my problem, but it really is, because those people are then spreading their nonsense everywhere else. And they're sending it to other incarcerated people. They're sending it to their formerly incarcerated friends. They're telling people that voting doesn't matter. They're telling people that they can't vote if they've had a felony in the past. And these are the type of narratives that take hold, and it becomes very difficult to outroot from our community. So we need to be proactive, and we need more people who have the skills and the abilities to explain things to people. Because again, ignorant people are controllable people. And I believe that is 100% how Donald Trump had all them people storming the Capitol, thinking that, they would not have felonies, and look, it worked out for them. So.
Yeah, no doubt. Listen, thank you guys so much for this. This discussion has been amazing. I want to close out, but before we do that, I want to go around one more time and just get folks to give out your contact information. How can people reach you, and any announcements, upcoming events, or things that you want people to know about your work, things that you may have going on in the future? Brittany, you want to start?
Hello. So I can be reached. You can actually text We Matter. I think somebody's on here from Black Voters Matter. So if you could put the text link in that chat, the comments, so folks can reach us, that would be great. I am here in Allegheny County. You could also send me an email, Brittany@blackvotersmatterfund.org. Our website is www.blackvotersmatterfund.org.
Cool. Tanisha?
Not me looking up my social media handles. I will put those in the chat. So at the Abolitionist Law Center and at Straight Ahead, we always have some things cooking. We work on, on our C3 side, we work through litigation and community organizing. And on our C4 side, we work through legislation and, again, community organizing. We have bills on our Straight Ahead side that address things like, medical parole, solitary confinement, the Prison Oversight Board in Philadelphia. We've done things like pass great things like the solitary confinement bill in Allegheny County. We're always looking for people to join in on those initiatives. And then on the Abolitionist Law Center side, keep your eye out. We have, PA Supreme Court decisions coming down about felony murder and life without parole. So those are things that you can always get in contact with us for. I always do organizing locally and sometimes statewide around our jail oversight board, around youth incarceration. You can find me anywhere and everywhere at this point. We have a website, abolitionistlawcenter.org. We are on Blue Sky. We are trying to leave Twitter. And we are on Instagram and Facebook. And then if you ever want to follow me for my random shenanigans, it is chaotic, but you can find me on Twitter at Tanisha Yvonne with an E.
Awesome.
You cannot find me personally on social media, but you can find my job. It's at One Hood Power, at the number 1, HOOD Power. That's also onehoodpower.org. That's where you can find us on Blue Sky, X, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, and sometimes LinkedIn. We have a lot of great things coming down the way. Next week, we'll be launching our People, Politics, and Power summer session classes and courses. So we're inviting people in to learn how to be organizers, to have some of that training based on like historical perspectives and some of our progressive wins and progressive leaders. So we're launching that next week. We are involved in the election that's happening tomorrow. So you'll see us around the polls, making calls out to get people to come out to the polls for our endorsed candidates. Include our slate of 8, just a slate of 8 judges. So that is some of the things that we have going on the One Hood Power side.
Wonderful, wonderful. And again, Leigh Owens with the Pennsylvania Prison Society and PENNfranchise. You can reach us at www.prisonsociety.org. And you can reach me personally at Leigh, Leigha Owens on social media. And I think that will wrap this webinar up. I hope that you all will go out and vote tomorrow if you haven't already mailed in your ballot. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you to this amazing panel for this information that you guys have given us. You guys are amazing. And I just want to say that it's been an honor for me to be on a panel with 3 wonderful sisters. And I want you guys all to know this was intentional. I did this on purpose. And that, this has been amazing. I have much love for all of you guys. and I have much love for Pittsburgh as a Philadelphian, and not the Pittsburgh Steelers, but Pittsburgh.
You almost
Listen,
like you're lucky your quarterback is fine.
listen, shout out to Miss.
Just because I'm here, you know what I represent.
You know, it's
You know
okay.
what I
You're lucky your
represent.
quarterback is
Loudly
fine.
and proudly.
I mean, if you want to do this again with the quarterback, you know, Lee, I
Yeah.
feel like we would, we would do that as our, our pipeline, right? Our pipeline, our community building.
Marriage to but it's
Listen,
really
he has a black wife, he has a black staff,
Yeah.
black support. So yes, I feel
We
like
have
he
to
would,
love Taylor.
friends.
yeah.
Look, we will accept you, Pittsburgh. We accept you. We embrace you.
Listen, at least my number 2 team. So, especially since this season coming up is going to be rough.
I will say that I felt like I did have Jalen on my football fantasy team last year. In my defense, I did it. It was my first time doing football fantasy, and I thought we were only doing it for one game. I didn't realize we were doing it for a whole season. But be that as it may, I did not come in last, thanks to him. So again, the love is there. The love and support will always be there.
And look,
and shout out and because it's on your wall. Today is Malcolm X's 100th birthday, so shout out to Malcolm X.
Yes.
Yes.
Are we still live? Has the live stream been shut down?
We're
Live.
live. We're going to shut it down now.
Palestine and hooking it with Jalen Hurts.
Listen, yes,
Thank you, John. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for this time. I'm going to try and edit up some clips. Probably won't happen before Election Day, but we'll get some stuff out for social that we can share between now and the general. But thank you guys again. And next time I'm in Pittsburgh, I'll holler.
Thank you.
See you guys.